Amber Antonelli and Anthony Esposito, welcome to the Plant Yourself podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having us. Our pleasure.
Yeah, so first we have to explain to everyone why we have a foreground and a background person. So Amber, you're sitting on the floor because
I can give the full because of that.
Okay.
It's a little, I'm due in about
Could be any
3 days. 3 days. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are listening and not watching the video, we got to see a beautiful pregnant belly, just a couple of days or a few days away from giving birth. So you're on the floor in front, and Anthony, you're on the couch.
Exactly. Yeah. Comfy couch.
Comfy couch. Yeah.
Smaller belly.
Right. Don't do what I did when my wife was in labor with our first one. She was in the jacuzzi tub at the birthing center, and I was sitting on the edge of the tub, and I kept complaining about how uncomfortable I was. That's a no-no.
No.
Yeah.
Hopefully he has enough sense to feel that one out.
I do plan on blowing this horn a few times to make her laugh a bit, but we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. Plans to blow the horn as soon as her head pops out.
As soon as I see the head.
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's always good to have a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's our birthing plan.
Yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Right. So we're here to talk about plants, and I talk about plants with people all the time. It's the Plant Yourself podcast, but today we're going to go a little bit deeper. We're not just going to talk about plants in terms of their chemical properties, but I think in terms of plants as teachers and information, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're going to be talking about a couple of specific plants, and specifically this plant called Iboga, or is that how you say it?
Yeah, Iboga or Iboga. It's pronounced both ways.
Okay. If I were in Gabon, how would I pronounce it?
Iboga.
Iboga. All right, so I'll try to be as realistic as possible. So Iboga is a plant describe it.
Go for it, kid.
Yep. So Iboga grows naturally in equatorial Africa, and so West Africa. It grows in Gabon, Cameroon, and parts of the Congo. All three of those countries border each other. That's Isabel. And in Gabon, because it seems like it's growing the most prevalent there, or the strongest there, because there's elephants in the country Gabon, and the fertilizer from their poop helps to grow the medicine and strengthen the Iboga tree.
They actually eat the elephants eat the medicine as well. Actually,
Monkeys.
The national treasure of Gabon as well.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's where it's growing naturally in those three countries.
Okay. And what does it look like?
It's amazing how powerful the medicine is, how strong the medicine is. That it's just a little bush, a little tree. I mean, it grows somewhere between maybe 5 feet to 10 feet. Kind of has a little bit of an orange fruit on there. Beautiful, vibrant green leaves, and the alkaloids. The medicine is in the second layer of the root. So there's a video on our website of them harvesting the medicine. And so they'll get down on their knees and they'll start shaving the root of the tree. They don't necessarily pull the whole tree out.
Yeah, they do it in a very sustainable fashion, which is nice.
Yeah. And so the second, the third layer of the root is where all the bitterness and all the alkaloids appear.
Okay, and what does it do?
Wow, what doesn't it do? Iboga is a teacher plant. It's so it has a very high level of intelligence. The medicine is really ancient. It goes back a very long time. Some would say 1,000 years. Some would say 100 years. And the idea behind ingesting the spirit of the medicine is to go within, is to learn about our lives, is to study, the energy of our being, to learn about who we are and why we think the way we think and why we feel the way we feel. And we like to say that Iboga is the greatest hunter for the truth, and that it never misses its target. So when we ingest the medicine, the spirit of the medicine and its intelligence gets on board with our soul, our spirit, and our infinite wisdom. And so the combination of our soul and our spirit and the spirit of Iboga, the intelligence of Iboga, it knows everything about us. And
so this happens, just to side note, it's through a psychedelic type experience. Yeah. Is typically how that happens, and it shows up for everyone in a different way. So no journeys are the same. No two experiences that the same person has in 1 week would be the same, but it does everything that Anthony's describing by essentially moving the ego out of the way and connecting with that person's higher wisdom through a psychedelic type experience. So.
Okay. So one of my roles here is to be the proxy for my listeners who may have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm like, there's two things that I think are going to be speed bumps for folks. One is, you say this plant has a high level of intelligence and it's a teacher. What does that mean? How do plants have intelligence? I mean, I grow plants and they grow and they die, and I eat the broccoli and I pick the cherry tomatoes. I don't think of them as having intelligence in the way that, like who has intelligence? Like a person who says smart things has intelligence. A dog or a pig has intelligence. They can figure things out and learn things. But what's the definition that you're applying to intelligence in a plant?
Well, so, I think we tend to quantify intelligence with the presence of an actual brain, right? And I think that, most people believe that human beings are the most intelligent life forms on the planet, even though,
right. Yeah, we're doing great, right?
We're really on top of it. We are in certain ways we're not. But that, we have a leg up over, any of the other life forms, like a cat or a dog or a pig, as you mentioned, because we have sort of the logical mind, like we're not only working from instinct, but, that's a whole nother topic. We don't want to go down that road necessarily. I don't know that I believe that humans are the most intelligent beings on the planet, but we certainly, we have capabilities beyond what we've seen, with just sort of your average animal. But in terms of intelligence of a plant may not have a brain per se in the way that we see that, show up for a human being or an animal. But there are, if you look at the emergence of the popularity of psychedelics as emotional healing components these days, with psilocybin, mushrooms being one of the more popular ones right now, 5-MeO-DMT or regular DMT. DMT actually exists in a lot of living things. Ayahuasca, Iboga, Wachuma, or San Pedro, mescaline. There's a lot of plants that are known for being able to move the ego out of the way and access the higher intelligence that is already present within each individual person. We have a spirit that is our highest wisdom, and then we have the ego that informs our decisions about brushing our teeth and making regular day-to-day decisions, but it also is responsible for keeping us safe. So in our lives, when we get wounded over the years, as everyone does, younger life trauma, older life trauma, just being out in the world, working too much, participating in addictive behaviors, et cetera, all of that is driven by the ego. So the plant intelligence actually connects with our own highest wisdom. So in terms of, what to say to the listeners or the viewers about a plant having intelligence, I mean, that's a kind of a scientific, there's a higher level scientific answer that we could use, but there also just is a lot of data, specifically more recently, that these plants are very, very capable of moving our own conditioning and pretenses out of the way and connecting with who we really truly are in our essence.
Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, in some ways, like the answer to, like, we can talk about like intelligence, but when we're really talking about like the plant interacting intelligently with us, it's not something that you can explain to someone.
That's probably actually really good.
Basi. And Basi, B-A-S-S-E, means truth in Bwiti, in the tradition where the medicine is coming from. So, exactly.
Yeah.
How do you explain, this is a personal experience.
Right. And, and also if we're, I am my ego, right? In terms of the way I function in the world. So if you tell me there's something else beside the ego, or I can quiet the ego, then I'm like, well, who the hell am I now? Like, I don't even, it's hard to imagine having a place to stand.
Yeah.
Well, but so think about when you decided to make the shift from the old lifestyle that you were living into this new lifestyle, and being aware of how you're treating your body and how you're interacting with the foods that you eat, and I'm assuming some of the thoughts that you think. I mean, the wellness goes much further than just the food that we put in our body, right? It's a very holistic process.
Sure.
So, when you decided to make that transition for yourself, for your family, there was a piece of you that was feeding you information saying, what the way you're living right now is not really working. There's a better way. I sense that probably wasn't coming from the ego. I sense that was coming from a deeper place inside of you that was saying, you need to search for a way that's going to actually help you live this life to the fullest. And that is really where we receive people that come to work with us, because they know that the way that they're living, whether it be with anxiety, depression, maybe they want to change their diet. We have a lot of people that come to us working on just living a more full life. They're not necessarily working only with trauma and PTSD and, all of these things that so many of us suffer from. Maybe they just want to fine tune and take their experience, this life experience, to the next level. That's coming from a place deeper within them than the ego just telling them, well, this is what I should be doing. It's coming from a knowing that's within us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's still hard to believe in, right? Because the ego wants to take credit for everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, but yeah.
Right. So in a sense, there has to be a leap of faith into some other state of consciousness than the ego.
Of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. You have to be willing to put the ego in the back seat, so to speak. The idea is not to kill the ego. It's not to destroy it. It's not to dissolve it. There's a lot of spiritual teachings that espouse that we're trying to disintegrate the ego. Anthony and I specifically don't believe that. We think that we
need the ego.
Yeah, we need it, and so it's a healthy balance. But yes, you do have to be willing to put the ego aside to absorb, whatever information may be coming through. But I mean, listen, the bottom line is that we have people that say, and this is not just people that work with us, this is sort of an overarching consensus, that you can receive 10 years of psychotherapy in one night working with this medicine, and in ways where it actually reprograms your subconscious mind, whereas psychotherapy is working with the conscious mind, and the subconscious is 95% of the operating system. So if you're working only with the conscious mind to try to reprogram the way that you operate, around the types of relationships or addictive patterning or whatever it may be, the way that you eat. If you're only working with the conscious mind, you've got 95% of the operating system that's essentially working in old patterning, whereas plants like Iboga, ayahuasca, and all of these other medicinal plants will work with the subconscious to actually start to remove some of those grooves.
Mm-hmm. All right. So before we get into how that actually works and what it does and what the evidence is and what you guys do, it'd be useful to introduce our guides. Like you guys both have, journeys, life journeys of wounding and recovery. So I think it'd be useful for my audience to kind of get to know you a little bit. Can you each do a couple minutes, introduction to yourselves?
Yeah, totally. You want to start?
Yeah. So for me, well, I think like anybody, the wounds started early on. I mean, wounds can start when we're in the mama's belly. But for me, it was as a young child, it was sexual abuse. So sexual abuse from my stepbrother, and a long story short, that caused a lot of trauma in my life. By the time I was 15 or 16 years old, they had me on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication because I was starting to get really angry. As I was starting to get in touch with my feelings as a teenager, I started punching holes in the wall, and I was angry, very angry. I was lashing out.
And did you connect it to the sexual abuse in your mind, or was it just?
At the time, no. At the time, I
neither did anyone around him.
Yeah,
no one thought there was something else going on.
Just like
go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like Anthony's wild and out of control, and we got to sedate him somehow.
And that was it.
Which is very common. Nobody really looks deeper into what's happening with kids. They just want to put them on medication.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. No one knew. No one knew what was going on. And for me, the only outlet that I had was sports. I was a really, really good baseball player, and going onto the baseball field was the only place that I felt safe. Like I felt, okay, safe here. This is a game that I enjoy. I'm good at. I'm getting recognition, and I feel well protected. And so I put all of my energy into playing sports, and sometimes that could be of this fault to somebody. When you're putting all your energy into something, all of a sudden that collapses. What do you have? And so for me, it led to, I think that my childhood led to a lot of self-destructive behaviors, led a lot of anxiety and self-hate, and just being uncomfortable in my own skin. And that was really the bottom line for me. I just did not feel comfortable. I wanted to run from everything. I never really understood what it was like to be in touch with my own feelings and to really know who I am. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until my early 20s that I let the cat out of the bag, and I told my family what had happened. But I essentially just dropped a bomb in the living room and then left. And then took off with my life. And the turning point for me was in 2007. So I'm 43 now. I'm going to be 44 in a couple of days. When I was about 32, I overdosed on GHB with a best friend of mine at the time, and unfortunately Justin didn't make it, and I did. And from that point, something.
And what did you overdose on?
GHB. Back in the day, they called it the date rape drug.
It was an accident. It wasn't something they were using on a consistent basis.
It was a very tragic accident. But from that point is when things really started to shift for me. Because like I said, for the longest time, I was completely uncomfortable and heavily sedated on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication. But when that happened to me, it was kind of like an existential experience, and I just wanted to, after spending 7 or 8 days in the hospital, I just wanted to be out in nature and climb Camelback Mountain. This happened in Phoenix, Arizona, and ride my mountain bike and swim. And then it was a couple of years after that, I did a self-induced detox from antidepressants. One day I just decided, we were on this beautiful island in Thailand, that I didn't want to take these pharmaceuticals anymore. I don't want them in my body. I don't really know what to do, but I'm going to stop taking them. And I stopped taking the pharmaceuticals, and ayahuasca magically appeared in our lives. It was a Peruvian shaman on this beautiful island in Thailand coming to do a retreat, and we ended up participating in it. And that started my spiritual exploration with plant medicine, and that was in 2010.
Ayahuasca would be considered sort of the counterpart to Iboga, not the counterpart, but in terms of like they're sort of the two highest level teacher plants considered by many. Iboga having more of a masculine spirit, and ayahuasca having more of a feminine. But ayahuasca is from the Amazon basin, and Iboga is from the African jungle, just to give some of the listeners a little bit of context. But there's a lot of information out there online too to read.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so I mean, it was trauma. It was childhood trauma, and then I would say a lot of adult trauma, and a lot of uncomfortability, just being uncomfortable, heavily sedated, that drove me to a place of wanting to wake up, wanting more out of my life.
Yeah, and before we get to Amber's story, just a couple of sort of questions about yours. I mean, the story is like for the untrained ear is, okay, you had this bad thing happen, and then you were put on lots of drugs, and then you got off the drugs and you started taking drugs, right? So kind of like, distinguishing between the, natural plants and things like, so for me, I'm listening and I'm like, the tragedy, and this happens all the time to lots of people, is that they are drugged with antidepressants or anti-anxiety meds, and to dampen symptoms without ever being given guidance on healing, on how do you actually live a life that in which these things have happened, and in which these thoughts and constellations of emotions and sensations constantly come up. And then you, like, the story wasn't you got off the drugs and then you went into 20 years of psychotherapy until you understood yourself, right? The story was this other drug came and did something positive and generative for you that the other drugs did not do.
Yeah, I got it. So the way that I see it is the plant medicine is not a drug. I mean, the label drug, I guess it's just a label, but like pharmaceuticals are drugs, and the street makes drugs. Mother Nature makes plant medicine. And I know somebody could say, oh, well, heroin comes from a plant. Yeah, well, opiates or the poppy, the heroin plant is actually, you can use it in acute situations that somebody might need if they're in severe pain. In a
very productive way for a short period of time.
Exactly, but once the street gets their hands on it, or the pharmaceuticals companies get their hands on it, they can make it, they can synthesize the drug and get people heavily addicted to it, then it's a whole nother ballgame. So my point is that there's drugs, pharmaceuticals, and then there's medicine. Mm-hmm. And the medicine, like that Iboga here, this is not highly addictive at all. This is actually a scheduled.
Not even remotely addictive.
Like going to ingest this takes a lot of courage, a lot of time, a commitment to put this in your mouth. Whereas like a street drug, a pharmaceutical, if they got you hooked on them, it's just like you're taking them like candy. There's no way on Mother Earth's, God's green earth, that we can take this like candy. There's absolutely no way.
The reason being, I'll just interject here for a second. The reason being because drugs dampen the symptoms, right? So they dampen the pain. They dampen the way that we feel. They put a blanket over things. This brings everything to the surface. So everything that you try to run from, that you don't want to look at, that you have been trying to suppress or trying to deny, comes up so that you can understand it and learn how to transform it. Whereas when you're taking drugs, you are
Masking the pain.
you're masking the pain. And of course, in my younger years, I used psilocybin and LSD and MDMA. You know, a lot of these medicines that are being used for healing modalities now in a party type fashion. Mm-hmm. But first of all, they're not meant that way. And then Iboga specifically, since that's the basic topic, is not something that you take for fun. Well, it's just simply, it's not fun. I mean, it can be fun. There can be really beautiful times during a journey, but it is absolutely not a recreational experience.
No, it's not recreational, but yes, the medicine can be cheeky, like the spirit of the medicine. Mm-hmm. But something very interesting is with pharmaceuticals or street drugs, typically your tolerance goes up and up and up, so meaning that you need more of the antidepressant, you need more of the anxiety medication, you need more of the cocaine, you need more of the opioid, whatever it is that you're using. With Iboga, your tolerance drops. So you need less and less. Like, so for us as practitioners, a small amount of medicine is all I need to be able to conduct a ceremony. I don't need to take heroic doses or large doses to conduct or operate.
Or to even learn something about your own life. And the reason being is because the more cleaning you do, so let's use food for an example, since that's something that you can relate to and a lot of your listeners can relate to. You are probably receiving a lot more nutrition from the food that you're eating now than you did, let's just say, back in the day when you were eating McDonald's and, a lot of processed fast foods. You had a little bit of kale. It probably didn't make a whole lot of an impact because there was so much other toxicity in the way. Mm-hmm. That's probably a fair statement. Maybe not a scientific one, but do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that when you're good at integrating something, you need less of it to get the effect.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, also the mental and emotional and physical body is more clean. Like for us, yoga is not just for the mental and emotional body, the mind. It's also for the physical body. It's a huge reset. I mean, it's been known to help with diseases like Parkinson's. I mean, helping the gut do a reset. It really detoxes the body on all types of levels. And so, to Anthony's point, you need less of it because things are cleaner.
Yeah. Is it like when I clean my office and it's been months, then I have to do a huge effort. But if I clean it every day, then I just have to do a little bit.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And that would definitely be the case for people, who do decide to take this journey to work with different types of altered states of consciousness, which is essentially what these plant medicines do. They alter our state of consciousness. And, if you do it once in 1975 and then you don't do it again until, 2019, there's a lot of time for toxicity to build up. If you do it on a more consistent basis for a time period and really work with the information that you're receiving and you integrate that in terms of changing your behaviors, changing your relationships, changing the way that you treat your body, changing, addictive behaviors, et cetera, then there's less cleaning to do all at once, just to your point of that metaphor that you just offered.
Okay. But going back to what you're saying, it does make sense that drugs are separate than medicine. Yeah, like the way that the pharmaceuticals advertise drugs. I mean, there's so many drugs out there that are doing the reverse effect. And I'm not saying that all of them. Some people might need a specific enhancer of an SSRI, but for the most part, these medications are used to suppress emotion and feeling. We just lost you.
Sorry, that's the cat. Sorry, there we go.
That's all right. My listeners mostly love cats.
Yeah,
perfect.
Good.
Perfect. We're definitely cat people. But yeah, I mean, those like pharmaceuticals or street drugs, most people are taking them to suppress to not feel, whereas like Iboga and these other plant medicines and psilocybin and fungi, mushrooms, or people are taking them to feel,
Right.
to really feel
Yeah.
feelings.
So before we get to Amber's story, there's just a couple more threads I want to follow. You mentioned that the Iboga brings everything up to the surface that you had otherwise, that you're either repressing with your own internal, emotional constructs or with the pharmaceuticals. When I hear that, I get a little bit worried that it's going to be some sort of like Tony Robbins thing where like it's going to, like, some people are not ready to face everything, right?
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So what's the difference? What's the difference between Iboga and some chest pounding guru who's going to break through all sort of psychically violently breaking through all your barriers and cleaning you out?
That's a good question. So one thing is certain is that when you have Tony Robbins, for example, pounding on your chest, he's telling you something on what you should be doing with your life or how you should be doing it, or whoever the guru is.
And we think he's amazing.
No,
Just a
I think
sidebar.
he's wonderful.
Like,
We love him. Yeah. Whoever the guru is, whoever the teacher is, whoever is telling you, the therapist, whoever's psychoanalyzing you, is telling you that you need to live your life this way. You need to do this to feel this. Okay. The other way is if you ingest the medicine, then you tell yourself what it is that you need to do. So you become your own healer in essence, because each one of us as human beings are our own healers. You've healed yourself through food and through nutrition and
using your
exercise.
intuition, knowing
Right.
that that's something that you needed to do for yourself, right?
So I think what happens is working with medicine, and the medicine is not for everyone either. I mean, not everything in this world is for everybody. We're not here to tell the whole world to take Iboga. I thought that when I first started working with it 6 years ago. Oh, the whole world needs to take this, but I don't take that approach at all, because the whole world is not ready for it, and it's just not for everyone. But the idea is to ingest the medicine and to wake up inside and to learn about yourself and to really feel the experience and to really connect to your own power and know that you have the ability to heal yourself if you have wounds, or you have the ability to make things happen in your life for you, not for somebody else telling you how you should live.
Another thing I'd like to add to that is that there's essentially two components to how these plant medicines work, and I'll group them all together because I feel like it's a pretty fair statement to say that they both have two aspects. One is that they, as we were saying, move the ego out of the way and show us a higher, more elevated consciousness, which gives us an ability to see and understand our lives in a different fashion, in a way that is not clouded by a lot of the crap that we've experienced in our lives, right? A lot of the conditioning, a lot of the wounding, a lot of the programming that we receive from our different cultures, etc. So then we have the opportunity, once we leave that experience, to take the wisdom that we've learned and implement it, so that when our mother reacts to us in a certain way or says something and we want to react in a certain way that we've reacted our whole lives, we actually have now the understanding of saying, okay, well, you know what? I don't need to react that way, because if I do, then I'm just going to perpetuate this relationship in the way that's not really working for either of us. I can see now, if I respond in a different way, I can start to make changes, right? So that's coming from the conscious mind and an awareness that was given to you, like from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins says, you should do X, Y, and Z. That's in the conscious mind, right? So you go, same with Eckhart Tolle, all of these teachers, right? These understandings come from a conscious awareness. Then the other way that these plant medicines work is that they actually go into the subconscious, as I was referring to before, and begin to rewire the way that we behave. They rewire the way that we think. Iboga, although there are not a lot of clinical trials or a whole lot of scientific information, it can rewire the neuroplasticity in our brain. So a lot of the change and transformation that I've received from the medicine has just been through consistent reprogramming that sometimes I don't even have to actively engage in. So
Now, when I hear that, like when I hired an electrician, I spent like days on Angie's List going through the reviews. There has to be a lot of trust to let a substance rewire your brain, doesn't it? Because I think there's a lot, a lot of people that I work with are very competent. They're sort of type A's in their own lives. They've made the decisions. They've done the things. And the idea of giving up control is terrifying.
Totally. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. And again, to Anthony's point, this medicine is not for every person. No. And we will definitely see the people that have trouble giving up control in the ceremonial space will have a lot of a fight. And, my mother, for example, is very, very into spiritual teaching. She is very open-minded and awake. She believes in what we do. She loves what we do. She will not take the medicine because she's terrified of losing control. So I myself have been a devout control freak in my life. And I'm a recovering control freak. I don't know that I could say I'm fully recovered, but there is a huge amount of trust that needs to happen. But if this experience, or whether it's Iboga or whether it's another consciousness elevating process that calls someone, if it calls you, then someone they're willing to start to loosen the control. Some people that are listening to this are going, there's no way on God's green earth I would ever do that. And it's not for them, and that's okay. But for sure, there's probably a lot of you that are saying that, but for sure, we have seen transformation in people in one ceremony that is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, one gentleman recently, just to give a little bit of context, 61 years old, was abused by his father worse than I've ever heard anyone being abused. I mean, the stories that he were telling, physically abused, like whole nother level, has carried this trauma with him his whole life. Never done really any work. Used to get in fights with therapists that he worked with, and he was just in contra to the whole world. Used the F word, every other word. He didn't have any friends. He hated everybody. He found Iboga on YouTube. Joe Rogan podcast. Came down to see a month ago. Yeah. Did one ceremony. Didn't even do the second one. And his whole life has changed in one night. I mean, not that there's not work to do. I mean, he's not just a completely different person. He obviously has to actively engage and change. But just talking to him is like talking to a whole different person now. So if you can give up the control for 24 hours, the gifts that you will receive are unparalleled. Yeah. But it is for everybody. We get that.
Yeah. So let's segue from your recovering control freakiness into your story.
Okay. So my upbringing, but by comparison was, to Anthony specifically, was a lot more nurturing. Parents divorced at 4 years old. They co-parented. And so, I had two loving, nurturing parents, both of them incredibly wounded in their own right, however, coming from very, very addictive backgrounds. They themselves were not addicts, but both of their parents were. And it wasn't until later in my life that I realized that I essentially grew up in an alcoholic household in the way that everybody related to one another, but there was no active drinking. I mean, social drinking, but nothing big. And just a lot of codependency, a lot of really enmeshed behaviors. I didn't have a great relationship with my father when I started transitioning into being a teenager. My parents started fighting, and long story, of course, but I had a difficult relationship with him, which caused also a lot of trauma that I never really saw as trauma, but now knowing what I know about child development absolutely was very traumatic in a lot of ways. Both my relationships with my parents actually very traumatic. And, I went on to start using a lot of drugs in high school. I mean, I was doing cocaine and methamphetamines and LSD and MDMA and mushrooms and everything, started, when I was 14 years old. Fortunately, I never had a very addictive personality, so I got out of it by the time I was 18 or so. But really,
what were you looking for in those drugs? Like what was like you had your first experience and you're like, oh, this is better than life? Like,
I possibly escapism, really. I mean, there was no, when I was using the mushrooms and the LSD, since of course those are sort of interwoven into this conversation in general, I was not having any type of spiritual introspection or existential experience like what we would use it for now. Like now, the way that these medicines are being approached is in a contained environment, a ceremonial environment, a very intentional fashion. I was using it all recreationally and going
like at raves and things.
Yeah, totally. And in combination with other substances too, so doing LSD and speed at the same time, like that's a really great idea. But so
they're really fast hallucinations.
Yeah, right. Very rapid. Yeah. And yeah, just, from then when I did stop using, just really unhealthy relationships with friends, with men, I was always rescuing people. I was, always finding wounded people that needed, a strong rock to take care of them. And, that was essentially what got me into the relationship with Anthony, was that, he was a wounded soul and I could save him. And basically what that fulfilled for me was the lack of space or need to look at what was really hurting inside of me, because I surrounded myself with people that were more wounded than I was, quote unquote. So
right. Well, you were the fixed one. You didn't have an obvious trauma. So it's like, yeah, I know how to play that game.
Yeah, exactly. The control freak going around fixing everybody else but myself.
Right, and all the fights are his fault, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because he's the wounded one.
Right, exactly.
I'm good at I'm good at that game.
Yeah. A lot of people are really good at that game. A lot of people, and so, yeah, when he did the self-imposed detox when we were in Thailand and we found ayahuasca, I went along just to check it out. I mean, I wasn't looking for any healing because God knows I didn't really need it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, it all kind of happened by accident for me. But really, what I discovered is that the way that I was operating didn't really make me all that happy, in so many ways, and so. No, I did not. I mean, yes, I have been, actively working on healing relationships in my life, but with both of my parents, it's still a work in progress. Neither of us can sit here and say we have everything figured out because it's a journey, I mean, it never ends. But the way that I feel inside, the way that I respond to life around me, my level of love and compassion for people and in the world is it's a whole different level. My mind is a lot quieter. I let things go a lot more easily. I'm not as hard on myself as I used to be. I used to hold myself to a very, very high standard, a very impossible standard that made me feel like shit a lot of the time, honestly. And so, my healing, I would say, has been a little bit more subtle and a bit more gradual than some. Mm-hmm. But as I was saying before, it feels sometimes like a much slower reprogramming of the subconscious than it has been like these huge aha moments of transformation that a lot of people that we work with get. I mean, a lot of people that suffer from addiction come to work with us, but that is certainly not the only type of profile that we receive, but it is a very, very powerful way to reprogram the mind. My journey with this process has been different, but nonetheless, not any less profound, I would say, in terms of how I feel before and after I started on this path.
Mm-hmm. And, you said, Make, it was an accident that you came along. I'm not sure that you believe that.
No, not at all. I feel like this is absolutely work that I was called to do, but in terms of, like, I was never the one seeking it out. Again, I'm sort of in the background, like holding things up and, being the support system, and Anthony went out and paved the way. And, a lot of people that come to work with this medicine are called. They get the calling from it. They hear a podcast, or they see a video, or they read a book, and they go, oh, there's something about that. I need to learn more. And then they go and they find out more information, and then they come and they do the medicine. For me, it was sort of accidental. He started working with it, training with it, and I went down to visit him and thought, okay, might as well give it a shot. And then little by little, I started receiving so much from it that it couldn't be denied. And now, the experience of seeing people, really seeing the courage, the courageous, heroic people that come to create such huge transformation in their lives and really be a witness to that. I mean, Anthony and I, we create a healing space for people. We don't consider ourselves the healers. Like, I'm not going to heal you. If you wanted to come work with this medicine, that's not my job. It's your job to heal you, and it's the medicine's job to help show you part of the way. But you do the work. And so, for us, it's incredibly gratifying and humbling to be able to see so many beautiful people from all walks of life that really just want a better quality of life. I imagine the clients that you work with around food. I myself have been a chef for 25 years. And after working with ayahuasca initially, almost 10 years ago, was when I changed my approach to food completely to a holistic approach. And the type of food that we offer through my culinary business is very much from that source. It's very much from that place. But yeah.
So has that changed your view of plants? Like, okay, so you've got this Iboga and ayahuasca and these other psychedelics that have intelligence. Do you now look at, like, broccoli and spinach and carrots and peas as having maybe not the same type of intelligence, but of having intelligence that we interact with?
I never really thought about it that way, but I will say that I definitely feel like that's a possibility. I mean, there's a fungi that's, and I'm so terrible with statistics, but that's underground in Oregon. It's like 60 miles square or something, that has an intelligence. Like, it's a whole nother level. That's not something that I think about directly, but I will say, in terms of looking at plants as really being a cornerstone of a healing modality, absolutely. I mean, my culinary business transitioned to a very plant-forward concept, not we're not plant-based exclusively, but very plant-forward, and just really using food directly from the earth to nourish our bodies, just like the plant medicines, using medicine directly from the earth to nourish our mind, body, and soul. I feel that they're very, that's key for me. And it was in elevating my consciousness. The cat is very, time for dinner. That elevating, my consciousness, it was impossible for me to go back and eat in a different way. I mean, I grew up eating relatively healthy, but really beginning to understand food happened for me when I started elevating my awareness around consciousness in general. So I wouldn't say that broccoli doesn't have intelligence. I mean, who am I to know? Like, why couldn't it?
Right. So I want you guys to describe, as best you can, the experience that someone would have coming down. And I know you can't talk about the individual inner experience, because that'll be titrated for each person. But just kind of what they would expect. But before that, you mentioned that there's not really scientific studies on Iboga. 5 years ago, that would have been true of psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, but all of a sudden with like MAPS and people like Tim Ferriss putting a lot of money and Michael Pollan writing a book, and like the shift even in the last 3 years about the acceptability of psychedelics by the psychiatric and psychological communities is there an effort to subject Iboga to scientific inquiry? Is it a sense, at some level, or does it feel like it's sort of disrespectful to the spirit to reduce it, to a randomized trial?
Right. No, disrespect to the spirit. Well, so one thing to note is that Ibogaine is one of the 12 alkaloids that is present in the full Iboga root. And so historically speaking, and currently, that has been used for opiate detox. It can detox someone from a 15-year heroin addiction in 24 to 48 hours with very little withdrawal and very little, you'll have physical symptoms in terms of reactivity to the medicine itself, but in a very, very easy fashion. Will you just push her away?
Yeah. I find the carnivores are often the loudest in these discussions anyway.
Right. She wants to speak up about plants. So there have been clinical trials done with Ibogaine, and they are currently doing some at, New Hampshire?
University of Maryland, and I think Johns Hopkins University are doing.
Okay, but those are still like controlled substances, right? Like you can.
Ibogaine. I don't know that Ibogaine is considered a controlled substance. It's still not.
Iboga's a controlled substance.
Iboga's a controlled substance.
Well, it's a Schedule 1.
It's a Schedule 1, yes. Right? But it's not. They're not. They're pushing to make Ibogaine legal for drug detox in the States, and so part of the purpose of these clinical trials is to show its efficacy, right?
Okay.
And there have been studies done with Iboga and the brain. It's just not a very widespread and not a lot of knowledge or information that's easily available. We have a good friend who is a clinical psychologist that has some really interesting information, but by comparison to so many other things, there's not a lot of it out there. And indigenously, are the tribes interested in people doing clinical trials with Iboga? Probably not.
No, they're not.
They're not really interested
in the medicine. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, the energy that we're feeling, they're not really interested in the medicine coming out of the jungles of Gabon.
Some so than others, but yes, it is sacred to that respect. But to your point, with the emergence of all of this awareness, Michael Pollan's book has changed the game, especially for a lot of older people who, might be a little bit more conservative in their viewpoints. And, my stepdad, for example, is very, very open-minded politically and loves what we do and really respects what we do. But it wasn't until reading Michael Pollan's book that he was like, okay, I can really kind of get on board with this my own self.
He actually went and bought a bunch of LSD that was last summer that he was thinking about taking. After reading the book, he's like, yeah, maybe I should take some LSD. And then it sat there for like 3 or 4 months, and then he ended up coming down to Costa Rica about 5 months ago. And I asked him, I said, did you ever take it? And he said, no, I just, I don't know. Just
because it wasn't natural. He wasn't feeling the call to do it.
He just wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
And we did some Iboga with him, which was really great. A smaller dose, a lighter dose, 73-year-old dose. Yeah. It was perfect.
But yeah, I think more and more, like we've made such huge strides, with psilocybin being legalized. Iboga was legalized in the city of Oakland, I guess a month or so ago.
Wait, psilocybin's been legalized? Where?
In Oakland, California.
Well,
okay. I'm just bringing up kayak. I need to book a flight.
Yeah.
Legalize is not the appropriate term. Decriminalize,
okay.
if you're found with it, it's not legal to sell it. But all these like weird loopholes has been with marijuana in a lot of states. But the awareness is definitely spreading, and I think really the most important thing to note here is that these medicines can actually help people feel better, whereas the pharmaceuticals just mask the whole process. And unfortunately, they have been rampantly prescribed for many, many, many years, and people are under the thumb of things that actually end up ultimately doing the reverse effect, because a lot of these pharmaceuticals are meant for very short-term acute usage. And where the plant medicine comes in is that it actually helps cure the root of the problem rather than masking the symptom. And so we have it grossly backwards in this country in terms of the pharmaceutical industry, in terms of the food industry, as I'm sure you are well educated in. We need to start nourishing ourselves from the inside out rather than using Band-Aids to help ourselves, quote, feel better for a short period of time that doesn't really impact anything on any real level for the long term. And so I think that more and more people are waking up to that, which is why you see the surgence of people like Tim Ferriss and Aubrey Marcus and Joe Rogan and, Michael Pollan, talking about these things. Gabor Mate, who is one of the thought leaders on addiction and child development, working with these types of medicines because they actually help people change their lives for the better. I mean, you and do one Iboga ceremony or one retreat with 2 ceremonies, and you go home and you change your whole life for the better. I mean, that's really what happens.
So I want to lead in. Sorry, Anthony, you wanted to add something?
No, I think you were about to go and talk about
the retreat.
The retreat and what we do. And
I want to introduce that question with a challenge, and I hope it's a well-received challenge, which is, it seems like the problem with pharmaceutical companies is that they went in, they went to the jungle and they converted these substances into, through a capitalist system in which, like, the best thing you can do is keep people feeling good and needing more and more doses. And yet you guys charge money for the retreats, right? So there's a danger. I kind of want to talk about what you're doing in terms of the responsibility. I'm also thinking in terms of like cultural appropriation, like these, you mentioned the word basse, you've learned a language from other people. Like I'd like you to talk about what you do and how you think about it in ways that kind of bring the spirit to the West, because you guys are obviously, interpreters of this tradition for people like me who might not be able to handle, a traditional Bwiti ceremony in Gabon, and yet there's a lot of ways you guys could fuck it up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes,
sure.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So I that's the challenge. I hope you.
No, it's a wonderful question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We it's really important that people understand what goes into this work for us. And going to Africa and going through initiation and going through my training and my apprenticeship, I've learned clearly that the medicine and the spirit of the medicine is the teacher. It is the boss, essentially. And it's my responsibility to have reverence for the medicine and to honor the medicine and to give back to where the medicine is coming from. Because the medicine is starting to make its way out of the jungles of Gabon and Cameroon and parts of the Congo, and it's coming into our hands. And there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that goes into carrying this sacred medicine to the West and sharing it with the people that come to see us in Costa Rica. And we, in terms of, charging money for this sacred experience. This is a lifestyle that we've created in order to hold this medicine and to create this sacred space. So, for example, I mean, we really can only physically do 18 to 20 retreats a year. This is not something that you're doing every week, day in and day out, because it takes a lot of energy and it takes a big commitment from us. You know, when we signed up for this work, the medicine and just the energy around it has challenged us in so many ways. You know, for example, just signing the lease on a 90-acre property here in Costa Rica, the medicine all of a sudden started trying to turn things upside down for us energetically, like pushing us.
And our lives just got really chaotic.
In a very loving and beautiful way, but a very challenging way, saying, are you sure that you're ready and this is the path that you want, and you want to serve this medicine and build the bridge from the medicine from Gabon here in the West? So I think for me personally, I have a lot of reverence and lots of respect for Iboga and sharing this experience with people and creating a sacred space, creating a really beautiful space for people to feel safe, to feel safe, to explore themselves on a deep level, to feel vulnerable, to share some of their deepest and darkest secrets with us, to trust us, to be able to hold that space. And I mean, I do this work because I found myself through plant medicine. I was able to get off pharmaceuticals and was able to heal myself and continue to heal myself and continue to be a student of life and continue to learn and continue to shed. And the calling was so deep, from the medicine and from the tribe in Africa to go a step further and to be able to create a space to where we could serve it in a very safe and loving and compassionate way.
I'd like to add that the way that we serve this medicine is so much more palatable for the Westerner. So to your point, handling getting turned upside down in a Bwichi ceremony in Africa, I will be the first to tell you that going to Africa for me, I mean, Anthony's been 3 times, I've been once, it's not my bag. I'm happy to have taken what I did from that experience and stay in Costa Rica and practice with the medicine in a way that makes more sense to me. And so the way that Anthony's teacher has adapted how they work with the medicine in Africa for the Western participant is something that we have adopted as well and adapted it in our own way. So Anthony and I carry this medicine in a different way than anyone else. And so we have a very soft approach. We offer a lot of integration support. Africa, you get no compassion, you get no integration, you get no nourishment.
And not because they don't want to, they just
it's just not how they operate. Yeah. You sit on a concrete bench in a smoky temple for 12 hours, getting your head pounded in. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's.
But their tradition comes from an intact culture where it's expected that you are integrated into a tribe, into a group of people. Like they're going to take care of you. Right, they're not prepared for us atomized Westerners who live on smartphones.
Yeah, no, for sure. And a lot of the trauma that we experience in our lives as Westerners doesn't really translate to them either. So they're not held in the same way. Their lifestyle, their reality versus ours, it's totally different. And so the way that we work with Iboga is completely different than how they do it in Africa. It's much more palatable for the Westerner. It's actually an internal process with a blindfold as opposed to being in a hot, smoky temple with, a lot of music and dancing and fire and external stimulus.
And it's amazing. It's really amazing.
No, it's beautiful, but it's not.
Different. It's just different.
And it's not going to give the participant the same internal process that they would get in terms of the clarity on their lives and about how, what changes they want to implement, like the type of journey that we hold or the type of journey that everyone that has worked with this particular shaman, we all sort of use the same basic container. Anthony and I have our own spin on it, but it's the same type of process. You lay on a mattress, you have a blindfold, and you go inward into yourself. And, we take this responsibility very seriously. And our job is to provide the safest space possible for people. And, we don't take it on from an egoic perspective that people are coming there and we need to heal them. We take it on from the place of wanting to make people as comfortable as they possibly can be, from everywhere from emotionally comfortable to comfortable in their rooms. Like, we have a beautiful, beautiful property that is very nourishing with nature. We have lovely rooms. We have beautiful food. So we want everyone's creature comforts to be completely cared for. If people need food and coconut and water the next day because they can't move, like, we want all of your creature comforts to be completely taken care of so that you don't have to worry about any of that and you can go as deep as possible inward. Africa, you're fending for yourself. You're using an outhouse. You're getting attacked by mosquitoes. You're, sitting up on a bench all night. Like, it's very, very hard to let your guard down. And our goal is to create an environment where people feel safe to completely let go. Did that answer your question? Was there anything about your question that we didn't address that had a few parts to it?
No, I think you answered it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more, maybe many more, I don't know. But in terms of this path with the medicine requires a whole lot from us. Like, it requires us to do our own work, our own self-inquiry, and it continues to challenge us on many levels. And for sure. And so, and test us, like, are you sure that you want to do this? And I've seen many people, come into this path or this environment and be like, yep, thanks a lot. This is not for me. We have people come on that want to train or apprentice and learn the medicine, learn how to hold space. And within months, you see them just getting worked, on an energetic and psychological level, just really pushed into their own stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a lifestyle that we've created. It's a path that we've created, but it's not an easy one on an energetic level.
No, we do it. We do it because it's so gratifying to see people actually feel empowered to make changes in their lives. And the beautiful thing about this medicine is that it's not something that you need on a consistent basis for a long period of time. Definitely depending on how much you're working with, how much trauma, how much PTSD, how much conditioning. Some people can change their whole lives in one retreat. Like, we just spoke to a gentleman that we worked with a few years ago whose life was never that he did one retreat and he changed everything about his life, and now he's doing amazing. He has not come back for what we would call a tune-up since then. We also worked with a young woman who did 4 retreats in a 3-month period.
Who was that?
Let's see.
Oh.
Yeah. So, but she also probably won't need to work with the medicine for a very long period of time. So it's not something that, yes, it's definitely an investment financially, resources involved, but it's not something that you need to work with consistently over and over and over and over again in order to receive a lot of benefit. Everybody's different. Some people will get a huge amount of benefit from one ceremony and decide not even to do the second one because everything is so clear for them that they feel like they got everything they needed. And then some people, will come back, in a few months, or they come back once a year. I mean, it's really, everybody's path is different, but it's not something that you need to work with often in order to receive a lot of benefit.
There's typically a lot to integrate with Iboga. With all of these types of psychedelic experiences, there's a lot to integrate, but Iboga specifically seems to hold on to us or stay with us for a longer period of time. So essentially it has, for lack of better terms, a longer shelf life. Months after the experience, we're connecting with people, and people are like, holy shit, like, my God, I'm getting this wisdom, I'm getting this clarity, this epiphany, this is starting to fall out of my life, I'm starting to attract this into my life, and months, even some people, years after, one retreat, two ceremonies with Iboga.
Sure. All right, so let's end with you guys telling us how people can find you.
So our website, our retreat is called Awaken Your Soul. We are in Costa Rica.
.co.
Yeah, awakenyoursoul.co. We've got some great testimonials on there, a lot of information, about the medicine itself, and, some beautiful testimonials about, how this medicine has really helped people. There's also a lot of amazing information on YouTube. If people just want an overarching, more information about the medicine itself. And
but I'm always happy to spend time with people on the phone and answer anybody's questions. And this is the decision for the participant to make. We
don't sell anything.
There's nothing. No, I don't want to sell anybody into coming to an Iboga retreat, because the people that come to see us, I want them to want to be there.
Yeah, right.
And be ready to do the work. To your point, like, not everybody's ready to let go of that control, and so
Right. I imagine a lot of your sales calls are actually trying to disqualify people who shouldn't be coming.
Good point.
Bossy.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, because. Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and for going out into the world and bringing the spirit and the intelligence of this healing plant to us.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing what you're doing. I mean, it's really, what we do and what you're doing are very parallel as far as I'm concerned. And, really just changing the way that we treat ourselves, both on a physical, mental, or all on a physical, mental, and emotional level. And so, there's no boundaries or borders. The way that we treat our bodies, the way we treat our minds, they all go together to create, the most optimum life possible. And so thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for having us on the show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always good to meet teammates, especially those with retreat centers in Costa Rica. So I hope to meet you guys soon.
Yes,
awesome.
We would love to have you.
Yeah, for sure.
If it calls you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? Don't hesitate. If you ever have any more questions, we're happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Amber and Anthony. Best of luck on the upcoming happy event.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We'll be in touch.
Yep,
okay, take care, Howard.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.